everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan, and the reason I am so excited today is because we are finishing our Summit Racing sponsored 5.3 liter How to Build an LS series with putting it on the dyno. In this video I'm going to be showing you exactly how to get your engine ready and prepped for the dyno, but you're going to want to be in constant communication with your dyno people to make sure you get everything right. That leads me to my first point. Be patient and be flexible. Things can change on a dime. There's a lot of people coming together in order to get this thing to be running. So somebody running the dyno can say one thing, the tuner wants another, the front office wants another. So just be flexible and roll with the punches. I actually take the front accessories off, which turned out to be unnecessary because I had to go put them back on once the engine was in the dyno cell. And there's a little bit of miscommunication in there, but that's okay. Be flexible, be patient, and you will be rewarded. Before I go any further, let's go ahead and thank our dynamite sponsor, Summit Racing. They have provided us with an absolute enormous amount of insanely cool products, some really nice performance products, as I will mention later on in the video. With our rotating assembly, those pistons and connecting rod, trust me, you want those things to be forged when you are putting on the dyno. I was on pins and needles, and it felt really good to have those nice forged Summit parts as our internals when they're spinning at 6,800 RPM. And without Summit Racing, this series would not have happened. It might have happened somewhere in the future, but nowhere near now, and I certainly wouldn't be dynoing it. So all of this was made possible by Summit Racing, so make sure you follow them on social media and buy all your speed parts from summitracing.com. And before we go to the dyno, I also want to go over our break-in procedures. So on an LS, a good thing to do is to get a pressurized pre-oiler. I've left a link down below in the description for that. And that hooks into the oil gallery and actually forces engine oil into the rotating assembly. And then you rotate it over by hand on the end of the crankshaft. And you do that a few times and keep pumping. You can even take the valve covers off to make sure you get oil all the way up to the valves, and that will completely pre-oil your engine. It is a smart thing to do. The dyno guys told me some people don't do that and they can get away with it, but why risk it when you've already spent all this money building this engine? You might as well pre-oil it. Or, if you ask me, putting it on the dyno is a great way to go because they already have that equipment and they're going to know how to break it in just perfectly, because they broke it in for 20 minutes at varying RPMs and then let it cool before we started doing just some dyno pulls. So you can apply that same logic if you just put it into a vehicle. And two more things before you go running off to the dyno. You want to grab your cam card. This comes with every new camshaft you buy, and it has important information like lobe separation, lift duration, whether it's advanced or not, built right into the grind. It's really important to have this card with you, and it does come with your camshaft, so make sure you grab it before you head out the door. And then the second thing you're going to need before we even get started is to know your compression ratio. Luckily for you, there's a really easy way to figure that out. Summit Racing actually has a compression ratio calculator. I've left it down below in the description, so you can click on that and figure out your compression ratio. And here's a screenshot of ours. We're just at 11:1. So we know that we're going to want to run a higher octane fuel. Actually, on this dyno run, we put race gas in it. I think it's 106 octane, something like that. But when we put it in our car, it'll be right around 91 octane, and that 11:1 will be just fine. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in for the final time on our 5.3 LS series. All right, in order to go off to the dyno, as I've mentioned previously, we basically have to take off our front accessories, but call your dyno shop to make sure they don't need them. You know, every dyno shop might be a little bit different, so you might want to give them a call. So the first thing we're going to do is remove our serpentine belt by loosening the 13mm bolt on the backside of the tensioner. And then we can remove our belt. There we go. So now we can grab our 15mm and remove our tensioner. There we go. All right, now we can remove our alternator and bracket. Now we can remove our water pump using a 10mm. There we go. And I'm going to leave this steam line pass-through block for our dyno because they actually have tubes that hook on where the water pump would go. I'm gonna remove this gasket. They have tubes that hook on, and it's gonna hook on through there, and then it's gonna feed our steam line anyway. So we can grab our 6 Allen and remove these countersunk bolts. There we go. And then just like the other 3 corners of our strap sling assembly, we're just gonna go ahead and put this 15mm bolt into the top of the head. Perfect. And before we move this thing anywhere, I want to point out that we put some tape over the throttle body opening. You want to do this so no contaminants or anything gets into your engine before it even gets a chance to live on the dyno. And then probably the most important sticker you can ever put on anything before you send it to the dyno shop in this situation is this one. No oil, because there is no oil in the engine. They are going to be supplying that for us, and I'll let you know what they're using. So on my table here, I have what we're going to be taking to the dyno. We have 2 more oil filters. They're going to need multiple oil filters because they're going to be doing multiple oil changes. They're probably going to cut open a filter to make sure there's no bearing material in it. So I want to provide those myself. There's already an oil filter on the engine, so they'll have 3 total. Here's our map sensor. I'm unsure if they're going to need this or not, so I'm going to provide it anyway. These came with our fuel injectors. They're little adapter cables. Unsure if they're going to need those or not, but it's better to have them and not need them. And then what they do need, absolutely, is a mass airflow sensor. They told me you need this. Again, you're going to want to call your dyno people to make sure what they do or do not need. So we have this mass airflow sensor. They said they need it. They don't need any tubing though. They're going to provide the tubing necessary for this to work. And this last part, the ECM, is interesting because with this LS, there is the early LS 5.3 and there's the later one. We have the earlier one, so we have the 20-something tooth reluctor, so it requires the older computer. If you have a later LS and there's more teeth on that reluctor, there's 50-something, you need a different computer, so you need to research that beforehand. But if you didn't care about the tune and you just wanted to get the dyno numbers for whatever reason or another, you can do the dyno runs and they'll tune it with their computers, but the rub is when you put it in your car, you will not have that tune. So if you bring your ECM, they can flash that tune, the super awesome one, over to you, and then you'll have it. So that's why we have this one. I got this from Flashmasters for $100. I've left a link down below in the description to this and all these products here before we go to the dyno. So now what we're going to do is hook up our sling, our engine crane, and get to pumping to lift the engine crane up. And I want to go over orientation before we even get it in the truck. We have the flex plate facing towards the front of the bed, so it looks like the engine's going in backward. Make sure your set screw is nice and tight on your engine crane, and then we can start jacking it up. And 2, when this becomes under tension, go ahead and check around and make sure the sling isn't touching anything that it could bend very easily, like a fuel line or something. Make sure there's plenty of room between everything like we have here. If there isn't, maybe you can get away with putting some really thick washers in there between the strap and the bolt head, as long as you have enough thread on the bolt to make sure it doesn't pull out of the head. We have our engine up enough to go on the truck. Make sure you move nice and slow with the weight this high, the center of gravity is this high, so it doesn't tip over. Now we can lower slowly our engine down onto the bed. So as we're lowering the engine, I'm also pushing it forward so the wheels don't get trapped in the gap between the tailgate and the bed. Just go slow and be careful. Just like that. Perfect. Just going to push our engine to the very top of the bed. So if you don't have a bed liner like we do, it's a pretty luxurious option. I'm not too worried about damaging the paint on this truck. You could use like a big shipping blanket or a piece of wood in between there to keep your truck in nice shape. and I have the engine completely against the top of the bed, and I want you to pay attention here. We put a beef washer on this ratchet strap, and we've ratcheted from the far top right and the far top left of the head all the way down into the corner of the bed on very, very stable anchors, so it can't come loose. And then maybe give it a jiggle test, try to... That's not going anywhere. Okay, so our LS is here on the dyno. Our tuner guy out there, tuner by Tad, making it happen. Joe here with Superior Automotive, or Engineering, excuse me. And we are just warming her up. How's it doing, Joe?
So far, good.
All right.
Temperatures are even. Air fuel looks good. Got about 25 minutes on it so far, just warm-up time.
Okay. So we're just breaking it in right now, right?
Exactly.
All right.
It's got a low pressure. Yeah.
57 pounds watt pressure. Water's at 80. So now that the engine's been running for a little while, we're going to go inside the dyno room, see how it sounds. Okay, so now what we're going to do after the instrument's been broken in for a little while, we're going to let it cool down before we start making some power pulls. Now we're kind of in a cool down period. We're going to be letting the engine just sit for a little while. This is the way they like to do things here. And since they run the dyno, we're following their rules and everything is going to work out great. So the screen we're going to be paying attention to is this bad boy, but Joe was telling me that this power number is uncorrected, so maybe don't believe that. Right away, but it'll give us a good idea, and at the end of the video I'll let you know exactly how much power our LS is making. And then we have our tuner guy over here working his magic, mapping ignition and fuel curves. That is a whole nother profession and a whole nother science all by itself. So in my opinion, when it comes to this, let the professional handle that for right now. All right, Tad, tuning by Tad. I just asked how the LS is interfacing with our fuel mapping here. How exactly is that done?
So we're using the factory ECU that would have come in your Silverado, Corvette, Camaro, and we're connecting to it with HP Tuner's MPVI2. So this allows us to use the factory software operating system with HP Tuner software and program it on an OEM style level.
Okay.
All the nitty gritty is available to us, and that car's going to run like stock.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Okay, Joe, is this the moment? Big power pulls?
Well, we're going to start easy. We're going to do a little baby pull and see what the fuel looks like.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there.
That was exciting.
Yeah.
That was a baby pull?
No, it's just an easy one. Looks like we're headed in the right direction. Hang on a second. Still going up. Yeah, it was 5,000 RPM. So.
Okay, how much power were we making?
378 at 5,000, just about 400 torque.
Okay, that's pretty good. 400 torque on a light pull.
Did you just want to do a bigger one?
Yeah, a little higher.
It looks like I could pull some out, but...
Good at 5,500.
So far.
Still coming up. We're still on the top of the graph there.
Okay, how do we do on that pull?
Yeah, an exciting looking graph. We got a big RPM motor, it looks like.
Okay.
Still pulling. Third column, yeah.
This is horsepower?
Yep.
And then this is torque?
Torque, yep.
So that pull we made 425 horsepower and 406 torque.
So you're just custom weight at 550?
Yeah.
That is cool.
Let me give you just a little bit more right
We'll
there.
hold it at 6 and see if it's still looking good.
Oh, that's better.
That's quieter.
454 horsepower and 396 foot-pounds of torque. Wow, that's way more horsepower than I thought it'd make. I thought it'd make like 410, 415, that neighborhood. Oh, the ignition clothes are falling off.
Get a zip tie. Where's zip tie racing?
Zip tie drags, man.
Sounds good.
So that was the 6K again?
That was 6,300.
63, okay.
She's still going up.
Still going up, 462.
She wants more.
462, dude.
Yeah, it's your head work and all your good machine work there,
Yeah,
Joe.
that's that head work
that's
coming
what's
in.
Play right now, man.
Pulling, yeah.
470, still going the right way. So do you just keep increasing RPM until it stops making more power?
Yeah,
That's your red light?
It's still going.
If your bottom end and your rotating assembly is good for stuff and you don't have any problems, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, baby.
Well, it's got
the valve springs and rockers are holding up. They're 6,500 and it's
Okay.
still good.
Well, it's supposed to have forged pistons and connecting rods,
You see
and
everything, Joe,
it has the
so-
stock crank that you guys
Right.
resurfaced for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Up to 6,700 RPM.
Still together.
Alright, what did we do?
Still going.
480, bro! 480! No way!
How about that, everybody?
And now you all know the reason the LS cliche is a thing. Because they're just so darn good.
Just gonna keep going.
Yeah, a little waver.
That was the end of the valve spring right
Yeah,
there.
okay.
I felt that with my feet.
Yeah, 493.
493 is how much power our LS is making. Well, congratulations, gentlemen. We've just made YouTube history. This is the first LS build from junk to dyno cell where I've shown you every single bolt you need to put on.
Beautiful looking torque.
So this is what you want to. This is what you want it to look like. You want to see this green line going flat, and then their horsepower going up like this.
You can see the horsepower climbs and climbs. We finally hit the end of the valve spring action right there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow.
But it pulled all the way there like it's, you know, Mr. Happiness going on.
So what was our max RPM? 66.
Yeah, that was, I took it to 68, which means I had to go to 7 to sample, but
Yeah.
it maxed out at 6,700.
So that's where our max power is. 493 horsepower and 387 foot-pounds of torque. Absolutely incredible.
That was 327.
Joe, thank you. Tad,
Thumbs
thank
up
you.
on that one.
Thanks, guys. That
you.
was really, really fun.
And here we are back from the dyno, safe and sound, secured the exact same way as we sent it off, but we had the front accessories on this time, which made it a little bit easier actually. So now we can just remove it and set it back down on the ground. And of course, move our flex plate and headers off because they didn't need those. All right, all hooked up. Start pumping the engine crane, just like that, until it's airborne. And then I'm just gonna move my truck and set the engine down without moving the crane around, because I don't like moving it around like this because it's too top heavy. And then we can just gently let it down. Guide it like this so it misses the legs of the engine crane until it's on its feet again. Then we can get that engine crane out of there. It's important to note too, when you're transporting an engine, always put some tape over any kind of intake, anywhere that leads into the engine. Go ahead and put some tape over it. It's really cheap insurance. So now our LS is safe and sound back in my shop. It made an absolutely colossal amount of power. It made 492 horsepower at 6,800 RPM and 412 torque at 5,400 RPM. That is way more than I thought. And I talked to the tuner guy after I shut off the camera, and he said if we weren't running front accessories, we were likely running into the 550. So what I can say is that if you follow my instructions, you buy exactly the things I bought and flow your heads exactly the way I did, you can expect to make 500 horsepower. This is a guaranteed 500 horsepower LS recipe. This was actually my first dyno test on an engine dyno. It was incredible learning experience. I learned an absolute ton about how the dyno works and what to use, what not to use, and I couldn't explain how grateful I am that I got to do this for a living. It was pretty cool because at the end of our rev range, you really couldn't see it on camera, but you could feel it in the room because the engine has a sort of harmonic frequency. And when those valve springs bottom out, they are at the end of their ability to spring back, which I believe ours was at 6,800 RPM or so. The harmonic shift of the room change, I could actually feel the shift in my feet because it's an all concrete floor. I could feel the, frequencies kind of doing this and then all of a sudden go flat. It was really weird and I loved every second of it. I'm also going to leave a link down below in the description for this piece of paper that shows you all our power figures on our final run, our best run. And you can look at that at your leisure. Before we go, I want to thank our sponsor again, Summit Racing. Make sure you buy all your speed parts at summitracing.com. And of course, I want to thank you, the audience. Thank you so very much for watching. All your comments have been absolutely incredible to read. I can't tell you how many I've got. People really on pins and needles for the power numbers, which I don't blame you. So was I. I was nervous the entire time. I actually had to drink a little bit of Pepto-Bismol to settle my stomach down before we went to the dyno cell. That's how nervous I was. So thank you so much for watching. From the bottom of my heart, I hope I've earned your subscription here today on YouTube. And I'll see you next time.